going to cover today is the first of a two-part series, right? So today we're going to spend our time talking about lead generation, right? We're going to go deep into sort of the tactics, how leads get generated, what that journey looks like, whether it's a lead that you've bought from a lead generation company, or you're working with an agency and they're using some different marketing tactics, or again, maybe you're doing them on your own and you're trying to learn a little bit more about that. We're going to cover all of that. We're going to go deep dive. The second part of this, which I definitely encourage you to attend and register, and we'll give you all the information on how to do that. We're going to dive into the sales part of the equation. So what is the sales process to optimize and to convert more of these type of leads into revenue, into actual loans, residents, cases, depending on your particular vertical. As I present, like I had mentioned in sort of the preamble here a little bit, I'm going to generate probably as many questions as I'm going to answer within the presentation. So feel free to fill up that Q&A section. Asia is going to be assisting me. She's going to be monitoring that. If we get relevant questions in line with the presentation, she'll interrupt me and we'll try to answer those, right on point. However, if for whatever reason they're more general, she'll queue those up. We'll have a robust Q&A at the end. Probably the most asked question before it gets asked, yes, you will be getting a copy of not only the video recording and replay, but also a link to the actual slides, because as you go through these slides, you'll see there's a lot of information you may want to take some more time consuming later. At the end of the presentation, again, there's no surprise sales pitches, but at the end of the presentation, we will take a pause and a break. And if you are interested in what Kaleido does and how we sort of solve some of these problems, and can help out in this lead generation capability, we're going to pause for a second, and then if you want to stay on, you can learn a little bit more about Kaleido. But no surprise sales pitches in this webinar. Well, so this is probably the holy grail, right? Leads that fit your business and consistently convert. That's what everybody's looking for. It's like, hey, how do I generate leads? Or can you give me leads that perfectly fit my particular business? This is really never gone into detail, but there is some problems in sort of lead generation and perfectly fitting with your business, particularly if you're buying leads or even if you have an agency helping you. Ultimately, the perfect lead for your business, your ideal customer profile, may not fit cleanly into the more generalized lead generation approach that a lead generation company uses, or the marketing tactics that an agency uses. So generally, demand, especially in the internet channel, is sort of more generalized, and there is kind of this bell curve in the market. And most lead generation companies and agencies are well equipped to kind of hit the center of that bell, and that doesn't always match up. Your company often has a niche or some particular unique value proposition that may put you on the end of that bell curve. And so oftentimes, this can be a challenging and frustrating sort of process because most of that effort is going into the center of that bell curve. But as you kind of understand this, you can start to build or shape your organization to more closely align with that, or at least be aware of and be able to account for the diversity that you're going to get when you're buying leads on a pay-per-lead basis, or you're actually generating leads through an agency, or as you learn and maybe do this internally for your own organization, even as you do it for yourself, you're going to get this diversity of sort of demand that doesn't always perfectly align with your business. So it's really important. We talk a lot about lead quality and those sorts of things, kind of a misplaced term, and we'll talk deeper about that. But it's important to really sort of hone your understanding of lead quality and what helps you to convert more leads into revenue. So we're going to share through, again, this process today and in our second part, kind of how to generate, source, and convert leads. That's really our topic. So ultimately from here, we want to, as we go through this process, you'll be more knowledgeable, better equipped to actually convert more of your leads and really understand what will cause you to have more success. And then of course there is a two-part series, and we'll kind of tease that out at the end of this presentation. But we're really kind of dig into the very detailed part of the sales component of this. So the first thing, and this is probably the thing that I'll say this a couple of different times because there's probably some top contenders for the thing that kills most leads, right? And one is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what internet leads are and the journey of the customer. So ultimately, first and foremost, this mindset will close more deals for you. Leads are people, right? And as a result of that, people are messy, and therefore your lead flow is going to be messy. There's going to be just as much differentiation in your lead flow, even if you're well targeted and you do kind of all the marketing best practices, you have the best lead generation company, you have the best agency, or you even do it yourself. There's going to be inherently a broad diversity because we are dealing with people. These folks will find all kinds of weird paths to fill out a form or to do an inbound call and ultimately end up in your CRM. So you need to account for that. There will also be a fair amount of confusion, misunderstanding, misperceptions. So when you call and they say, I never filled anything out, there's, again, probably more confusion or anxiety or those sorts of things playing into this mix. So all of those things we're going to talk about and we're just going to sort of account for, because this will give you a broader understanding of the diversity and differentiation in your lead flow and allow you to build better ways to approach these leads. Ideally, and this, when we kind of think about or talk about quality of leads, we like to think about creating designs, user experiences, copy that helps to guide and filter and better align the leads that are getting generated with your business, right? And so ultimately, even the form process itself can equip that lead with better expectations as to what comes next. So for instance, when we generate a thank you page, which is pretty common, it's like the last page of the form, we focus on calling that a next steps page because we want to set expectations. What's going to happen next? How do I know that when I submit this, I'm going to get what I expect as a customer, as a consumer, right? So again, trying to think of different ways and go into channels in such a way that we account for and an understanding that there's going to be variety. So why does consumer direct? So this has become, like, when we first started doing this, consumer direct wasn't sort of a terminology, but it's become like the default mode. So this is probably largely due to just the maturation of the internet. COVID accelerated this, but ultimately, whether you're a retail focused business or you're doing assisted living communities or those sorts of things, or you've got a law firm where you've been, again, more familiar with sort of people coming to the office, sitting in the conference room and talking about their legal situation, all of that has changed. So more and more consumers are expecting the convenience of consumer direct, right? So all businesses must figure out how to generate internet leads and how to service clients that expect to come to your website, schedule an appointment or fill out a form and get an instant response. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we even expect our groceries to be brought to our car these days, right? We expect same-day delivery. There's no reason to think that getting a mortgage or getting a consultation from attorney or talking about your case or even virtually visiting an assisted living community would be any different. So the consumer has changed forever their expectations from businesses, and that is that at least their first step should be able to be conveniently taken from their mobile phone and be internet based. So we need to adapt not only our marketing tactics, but also our sales process to accommodate these different types of customer expectations. So one thing that we need to think about, or often comes up, is really what is the difference between, or how do we compare the difference between sort of generated leads, the ones that we either within our organization, we have a marketing department that's generating leads, internet leads, or we have an agency generating leads, versus purchased leads. So things that we're paying for on a pay per lead basis. This is really important to kind of just understand the differences between these two, because they do affect lead conversion, right? Even to the point of understanding the difference between referrals, right? Because referrals are happening different. Whereas before we would take a business card, you would hand it to someone, they would then take that business card and call the phone number on it later. That's not really the way referrals happen now. It's really, hey, you should call Bill Rice. He's my person for this or that, right? And then they go and do a search. So even those referrals are coming through these internet channels. So you can see on the slide, there's a couple of different sort of differences between these. There's some benefits and some drawbacks of both. But one of the things that I want to sort of focus on the most are the ones that I highlighted here. So when you're generating your own leads, you inherently have more control and have the ability to sort of optimize and align with your whatever marketing organization you might have, whether it be big or small or non-existent, and your sales, but you'll be able to sort of better align that. You'll be able to take sort of quicker action against sort of what you're experiencing through the sales channel. So that again is the advantage of sort of generating themselves. The other thing that's an advantage of, and even if you're buying leads, you should be doing a small amount of lead generation. It also helps to inform you on sort of what is happening when you buy a lead, right? So you can ask better questions. You'll understand what they're telling you about their lead generation process. You'll be able to vet them in a better way. And so in purchased lead, the advantage there is you're often dealing with professional marketers. They're very good at what they do. They can source a lot of volume typically, and they can sort of turn you on and off, based on sort of buying per lead. Also, more of your investment is going towards the actual lead itself, right? So again, they've optimized those things. You're not necessarily paying for the labor that you would if you're generating themselves. So, but most importantly, like I've highlighted here, if you're going to purchase leads, you need to be educated. Hopefully this webinar will help enough to sort of vet those particular lead sources in an intelligent way so that you know what to expect. Not that these folks are doing anything nefarious, but the better you understand that lead process, the better you will be at converting and sort of engaging the consumer that they hand to you and put in your CRM. So I'm going to pause here for a second on this one because this is huge, right? So there is this sort of notion in the market of exclusive leads, and it's really important to understand that that truly does not exist. If you build a sales process based on the assumption that you're getting some sort of exclusivity to any customer that's in your CRM or that ends up in your CRM, you are disadvantaging yourself, right? Even if you get a referral, even if you have your best real estate partner give you a referral, I can guarantee you, even though they said, call Bill, or maybe I'm going to even connect you, maybe I'm going to visit your office together, I can guarantee you that person has gone to the internet and has done a little bit of research to figure out what rates are, and has encountered some other mortgage companies. So even a referral is not exclusive. Certainly, if you're buying a lead, even again, if they're not lying to you, if they're saying, hey, I'm generating a lead and I'm going to only give it to you and no one else, I'm only going to place it once, it's still not exclusive because that customer is going to do other research. And there's a good possibility they're going to fill out other forms. They're going to call other numbers. So this is a fundamental disadvantage in your mindset. So never assume that you're getting exclusivity to any customer, and you need to build sales processes and you need to approach that lead in such a way that you are competing for their business in all cases, even down to a referral. The other thing that's really important to this is never pay for an exclusive lead. You should not be paying a premium for an exclusive lead because it's probably not going to give you a monetary economic advantage, right? So this is really important. There is no such thing as an exclusive lead. The internet has killed all notion of that, right? It's just too simple to do that research. So this, again, will be a mindset. If you make these adjustments in your sales team, in your sales operation, in the processes that you do, you will automatically convert more leads. If you always assume that you're competing for the business, right? And which means you need to have some urgency, you need to be responsive, you need to listen, all those sorts of things. So another thing, sort of, you know, perfecting that leads, whenever your leads are not necessarily converting to the level that you expect them, and it's also important to have some reasonable expectations, and we'll talk some numbers here in a little bit about lead conversion, right? And what to expect from these. But ultimately, lead conversion is going to be optimized by a lot of different things. There's a lot of different factors, how we guide them, the user experience they have, the copy that they read, the expectations that they have as we generate those. And then once they actually, you know, come into the queue, there's also a lot of different factors that can optimize your conversion. Most leads will achieve an acceptable ROI, all the way from age leads to branded real-time leads, if you can match up the appropriate sales process with those, again, that differentiation. So most leads, particularly internet leads, even age data, can provide an acceptable ROI if you adapt the sales process in the appropriate way. So how do you kind of get above the competition? I think the number one way to really raise your ability to compete is to get an understanding of that differentiation, right, that you need in your sales process. So understanding lead sources, having the ability to transition and sort of craft in your sales process various statuses. So, you know, as you put leads or your sales agents put leads into different statuses to follow your sales process, what to expect and how to optimize those processes, or working in phase. As that lead goes through various phases, there's going to be a variety of things that you can do that can increase that contact rate, right? So in early phases, you want to optimize for contact rate. As you make contact with them, you want a script for trust and confidence building. Ultimately, you want to stop the shop, right? So you want to create some urgency. So it's really important to start to craft a set of processes and statuses that allow you to talk to and equip your agents to talk to leads at different phases and statuses of the sales process in different ways, right? That could be your automation. That could be the way that they reach out to them, they approach them. That can enable you to set up automation, those sorts of things. Also differentiate from lead sources. You will start to learn different lead sources will give you different types of leads, different types of people, different types of scenarios and situations. So the more that you can differentiate between all of those factors and sort of create an efficient but differentiated set of sales processes, again, usually guided by statuses and phases and lead source and those sorts of things, the higher your conversion rate will be. Okay, so let's dip into lead quality, right? Lead quality itself is a very deceptive term. I don't really love talking about lead quality because ultimately the quality of the lead usually has a more detailed, more specific granularity to it. Like, what is making this lead not work for you? You know, is the person not qualified? Is the person not responsive? Is the person looking for something you don't offer? So I like to, instead of talking about lead quality, especially when I'm talking with sales teams, I want to talk about specifically what is making the lead that I'm providing you challenging, right? And oftentimes gets conflated with this is the desirability from the standpoint of my commission, right? What of these leads will potentially yield me a higher commission? A lot of times those are more desirable, but they're not necessarily more convertible. So you'll hear me all the time talking about the difference between desirability and convertibility, right? And then there's some other things, technologies, AI and closed loop reporting that can start to help with this even more. But lead quality is a loaded term. So start as you're talking to your lead providers or you're talking to your agency, or you're even working within your sales team, teach folks to talk more specifically about what is becoming challenging inside of this, and also equip them, right? For instance, a lot of times I say, well, they'll say, hey, we want you to get us more, higher credit scores in the case of mortgage, right? Well, I can't pull their credit before I get the click, right? So also educating and understanding like what is possible within kind of the notion of making these leads easier to convert. So when we are talking about what makes things easier, one of the most obvious is intent, right? And so being able to measure intent or to start to look at your data and understand based on maybe what types of activity that you've done as a salesperson tends to increase intent, or maybe there's some characteristics of the lead that indicate higher intent. Again, using intent to try to shape what you're focusing on as a high expense salesperson versus what maybe you're using some automation. Again, this gets down to that differentiation, is figuring out, like, again, not getting distracted by desirability, truly looking to optimize the sales process based on intent. And then also, because again, I say this all the time, but leads that come into your queue, generally they all have an authentic interest in what you sell, but there are often gaps. And that's where your differentiated sales process should help with those gaps. Sometimes they come in with gaps of knowledge. They just don't understand what it takes to get a mortgage. They don't understand how much it costs to become a resident in a high-end assisted living facility. Perhaps they're not qualified. They don't have enough income. They don't have enough down payment. They don't timing's a problem. Maybe they're not ready to do that. So designing sales processes that allows you to close those gaps better than just throwing them away will, again, inherently increase conversion. So increasing conversion is not just getting them on the phone really quick and getting an instant decision. It's really taking all of that population of leads and figuring out how to create enough differentiated sales processes and flows so that you can turn more of those into leads by closing those various gaps. Some will close easy, some will have bigger gaps, some will need things cured. If you can accommodate that curing and that sort of closing those gaps, you will ultimately turn more of that population into closed deals. So again, building sales processes to accommodate and nurture for the purpose of closing those gaps that are making things challenging. Knowing how to qualify leads. So again, this is where a lot of times we have some sort of misunderstanding of terminology. A lot of times the focus is on marketing qualified versus sales qualified. And this turns into a like, hey, this is what we do, and hey, this is what they do. This is the way I like to break it down. From a marketing standpoint, the activities that marketing folks do, the activities that marketing does, we can filter and we can target based on things that are observable, right? A lot of times those observable are desirable features, right? We like to sort of inform those with data. So if we can take some of those observable characteristics, things that they fill out on the web form, and then we can track those back to what tends to convert, then we can feed that back and we can get more of those. So that's sort of our marketing qualification. That's what we can do. We can do some filtering and we can do some targeting, again, based on things that we can observe. We can't observe somebody's credit score. We can't observe their bank account, those sorts of things. Sales qualifying, right, is again a filtering based on observables, but the type of observables that we're doing when we're sales qualifying are behaviors. Are there certain behaviors, reactions to our sales activities that indicate higher intent? We're looking for those. We want to account for those. Are there activities that tend to increase intent? Are there things that we can do to increase the intent of that lead or to increase the urgency of that lead? Those are the type of things that we're doing when we're doing sales qualification. Ultimately, has to do with sort of the work and the building of those systems and reviewing that data to sort of build that model. So again, when we're qualifying leads, it is a symbiotic relationship between marketing and sales, but we need to understand what different pieces of the equation that we can kind of control and impact. Again, ultimately, intent is probably the most important thing. So again, discovering what is indicating the highest intent or doing things that increase the intent to sort of close that deal, to sign that contract, to turn it into revenue. That's what we're focused on when we're trying to kind of quantify ultimately lead quality. Again, this is like the number one limiter in sales production and the killer of conversion. So many leads get dropped on the cutting room floor or get trashed as, you know, dead or killed off in your CRM because sales agents inherently want to select desirability over convertibility. So take a look at this and think about, as you're training sales agents, to start to shift that mindset over to convertibility. Do some data analysis, do some investment in understanding what converts inside of your sales operation, inside of your organization. And again, you will significantly increase conversion. If you just let agents work towards their commission, right, and look for things that will pay them the most, then ultimately you will close fewer deals because it's a much narrower straw. And also just inherently, if you think logically about some of these things, a lot of times the less desirable leads, the intent is higher. These people want the product, but again, they might have some gaps, but their particular urgency, their intent, their enthusiasm for getting the product oftentimes will help them convert much easier than just sort of the desirability. This is the exercise I encourage you to do, and most people should do, is to kind of go through this matrix of desirability versus convertibility. So take your industry, think about these scenarios, and work towards this. And then from this exercise, see if you can broaden your product set. See if you can build nurturing and education paths to close some of the gaps between desirability and the things that are converting better. And then again, building curing paths. The art of designing lead filters, again, this is another one of those scenarios where you kill off a lot of opportunity. The ability to filter, especially when you're going pay per lead, oftentimes you will create filters that are very desirable, again, to commissions or ultimate revenue, but don't necessarily give you kind of the best conversion rates and ultimately the highest production. The best way I can describe this is whenever we're doing advertising or just a classic advertiser, let's take Google Ads for example. Whenever we're starting a new campaign, there's a tendency for us to do what we call broad match. We go broadly into the organization or out into the marketplace so we can bring in as much data as quickly as we can so that we can evaluate very quickly and optimize for the stuff that we're the best at closing. You should do a similar thing when you're thinking about leads. Go a little bit broader so that you make sure you're not missing any sort of edge cases that you don't think are very good, but maybe close really well in your organization. The larger your organization is, the more data that you want to bring in, the broader you want to go so that you can sort of develop a profile of your sales operation. So again, be careful not to get too narrow. You want to go broader first, look at the data, optimize inside of what's working inside your operation, because again, you probably won't have complete visibility. And then from there, you can start to tune and narrow down things to just the things that you're good at, right? So the work of conversion doesn't kind of start at that sourcing and qualifying of leads. So it's only 50% of the work. Ultimately, sales and marketing have to work together in a collaborative partnership. And so we never want to forget that sales is sort of 50% of that equation. And that feedback loop is really critical to any sort of lead generation exercise, whether you're buying leads or you're doing an agency or doing it internally. You got to get that feedback back to them so that they can get more of what's working in your sales operation. Otherwise, there's no visibility, and really the optimization only happens on the front end. So I can get advertising to get cheaper and cheaper for you. Doesn't necessarily mean you're closing more and more deals. All right. So as we wind down, I want to kind of give you a little bit of tease into next week, right? And so part 2 of this. So once we get the leads, ultimately we want to know, like, okay, how do we work them to maximize conversion? So that's really what we're going to touch on next week, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a broad overview, right? This ultimately, all the verticals, everybody that's in here, we're not doing e-commerce. This is not a browse, compare, research until we're confident and then make a purchase and no return. And then there's returns if it doesn't work out, right? This isn't retail. We don't get to browse and then just sort of try things on, right? Everything that we're talking about in this audience are complex and considered purchases, right? They require consultation, they require discovery, they require qualification and guidance, they require education, and they often require preparation and alternative solutions, right? So we have to envelop these people with impressions and touch points. We have to fill in all of these gaps in order to give ourselves a better shot at converting them. So I want to do this in a way that's natural and helpful, and it's beyond just pounding them with phone calls, right? I want to be politely persistent. And so this ultimately, if you want to do this well and you want to convert more leads, this means you're going to have omni-channel, multi-channel approaches to how you reach out. You're going to want to understand sort of this notion of sales funnels and how people move through the phases of the process. You do want to nurture probably the majority of your leads, because if I told you that I could give you a lead today on a consistent basis that would convert at 10%, you guys would throw money at me. But let's look at that from a different angle, right? That means 90% of those leads are not ready to buy yet, right? So what do we do with that? If you don't consider what you're doing with that other 90%, you're throwing a lot of money on the floor. So again, we'll go into very specifically some of those different approaches. You do want to understand, especially if you're buying or you're working with an agency, you want to understand deeply where these leads come from. You want to understand that journey. One of the questions that I always tell people to ask when they're vetting an agency or they're buying leads, and a lot of people will not give you this, but it's hugely helpful. Can you show me the last thing that that lead saw before it showed up in my CRM? Can I see that landing page? Can I see that thank you page? Hugely helpful. Great question to ask. Most people won't give it to you. A lot of lead providers and salespeople that sell leads don't actually know what that is, right? But it is hugely insightful to really kind of understand that journey that person, that lead has been on before it comes into your CRM. It'll help you close them. We talked a lot about process, and again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular slide because we're going to cover it in more detail next week. But the most important thing to take from this is not to be a hammer. Your customer's not a nail, right? We want to have a variety of different processes that, again, are politely persistent with them, but it does not, in any case, especially now, does it amount to hitting them with 3 phone calls in the first day. First of all, the phone's kind of broken, but we want to be thinking sort of broader. We want to try to identify and segment with statuses and behavior triggers and those sorts of things. So not only the marketing, but also the sales process, there's so many tools that can help you be more sophisticated. You should take advantage of that. This is one, again, that I want to clarify real quick because it's important. So sometimes these terms get used interchangeably, and a lot of times they involve email. But there is a clear difference between these 3 things, and you want to be using them in the right ways, and you want to be using all 3. Sales cadences generally connotate workflows. So what you do with active leads, this is high value activity. This is what you're paying salespeople to do, or you're helping to guide them. This is where you're putting a lot of resources in. So sales cadence help you with that workflow and help everybody sort of understand what the most effective workflow is. That's what sales cadences are. Lead nurturing, these are generally opportunities. Most of these folks that are in this process of lead nurturing have some gaps. They're either, they've got a gap in responsiveness, they got a gap in qualifications, timing, and you want to be able to close those gaps and you want to be able to stay top of mind with them. Email marketing, This is past clients, interested, prospects, unknowns. This is a more general activity that you do to a broader set of audiences. And again, lead nurturing and email marketing, you want to take this off of your expensive resources and leverage technology for these sorts of things. Like I said, lead nurturing is critical. I kind of already sort of said the punchline here, right? If 90% of your leads are not going to convert, there's no reason to throw those on the floor, right? So we need to account for this, and lead nurturing is a big part of this. Methods for building this lead nurturing system. I love the concept of statuses and having these inside of your CRM so that I can, as a salesperson, based on my activity, I can move that lead. And this is part of that SQL process, that sales qualification process, is to move them into an appropriate status that will then get them the appropriate treatment. It will guide me on how to communicate with them going forward. If I have automation, it'll guide that. And I just gave you some examples here of ways that you can get more granular. And when you use things like statuses, then you can create automation. You can create sophisticated lead nurturing systems and let that technology work for you, such that, again, your salesperson is only working on the things that are going to give them the highest return. You're letting some of that automation, some of that tech stack do the things that you're still trying to harvest ROI out of. Situational triggers, if you're trying to get things re-engaged, give them a reason. This is, again, something I see a lot in sales cadences and lead nurturing. When you send out a message, tell the person or give them some logical reason to understand why you reached out to them. So looking for situational triggers can be really effective in re-engaging. Let them know why you're logically reaching out to them. Content's a great way to restart a conversation. A lot of times third-party content is some of the best ways to re-engage. So something that's found in the public domain that you think would potentially help you start a conversation. Look for those in general and incorporate those into your nurturing campaigns. Most importantly, we want to learn how to elongate or account for elongated sales cycles, right? So again, 90% of these are going to take longer than you would like them to. So make sure that we're understanding that. That is the best way to outperform your competition. All right. So I'm going to skip through these so we can go to some Q&A. Asia, do we have any pieces for?
Yeah.
We had some questions.
Yeah, so we actually had a great question that relates to our next webinar topic that we're wanting to dig into around the FCC rulings. So the question is, can aged leads be a long-term strategy with the new FCC rulings?
Yeah, age leads are a really interesting piece. So first, I'm not an attorney. I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night either. So check with your legal, your compliance, because they will have, their approach for your organization, your sales organization. I will tell you that I do think aged leads play an important role in any sales operation. And the way I would define that is aged leads exist in your organization today. These are leads that you've given up on for whatever reason, you've lost contact with, salespeople have not done maybe the most effective things with. So they exist in your organization. So that's the first tier. So you should definitely account for and learn all about how to re-engage aged leads. There are approaches to acquire consumer data that can also be viable. So a lot of you guys in the audience, I recognize some names, probably are familiar with Eric Troutman. So I asked him a very specific question on one of his webinars about this, and I think this is insightful. If we have aged data, could we characterize that as consumer data or trigger data, right? That consumer has shown some sort of intent at some time. And so if you look at that characteristics, then you have a lot more flexibility in reaching out to that category of lead. So again, we could talk longer and sort of more specific about that. And maybe we'll do an upcoming webinar on kind of like handling age data and consumer data. But yeah, there's a whole category of consumer data out there. You know, Info USA sells consumer data all day long, and you can direct mail shops. That's what they live on, right? Is consumer data that they pull out of a database, and then they send out offers to, right? And so there's a right way to do that. There's a compliant way to do that. Um, Probably the most important piece that I'll kind of add to this, you don't want to use automation, right? That'll get you in trouble. You want to avoid do not call, right? And those sorts of things. So you want to comply with all of those constraints, but can you reach out to consumers that you have data on? Yeah, generally, yes, there are ways to do that appropriately. So, and again, don't be a jerk, right? That's the other thing. Don't take consumer data and be a jerk, right? So that'll get you in trouble faster than anything.
Yeah, so another question we got here. Um, so how do I vet lead providers? What kind of questions could I ask them as I'm trying to assess?
Yeah. So this can be challenging. Like again, most lead providers, again, experts at what they do a good job, are trying to do the best in generating a quality lead. Sometimes there's a disconnect between lead sales and actually what's happening inside of the marketing activity. But that's really the best way to kind of figure out, what you're buying is ask questions about the marketing. Like, what types of marketing do you do? Do you do SEO? Do you do content? Are these generated through Google Ads or these generated through affiliates? That's like a magical question, right? If they're generated, and most are generated from affiliates, that means a consumer's journey means that they're on one site, they learn something, they want help with, getting an appropriate service provider, and then they're transitioned to another site or brand or form experience, and then ended up in your CRM. And when you call them, you're a third brand, right? So you want to kind of suss those things out. There's a way that you can make that effective, right? Again, rarely is there a lead you can't achieve an ROI on. But I can take a customer that's experienced sort of three brands in their journey and still be effective with that, but I do have to have a different sales process. So understanding that journey is really important. And then I mentioned it in the presentation. I think one of the best questions is, can I see the landing page? Can I see the thank you page? Can I see what my customer experienced before it landed in my CRM? Can be, really important. So for your agencies as well. If you've got somebody doing marketing on your behalf, like ask a bunch of detailed questions. Like, what are you doing? Like, how do you generate a lead? What is my customer experiencing before I talk to them? That's everything for conversion.
Yeah, and along those lines, the question with the agency, kind of knowing what should the agency be doing for you? What channels should they be using? What results should you be looking for? Conversion rates.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that a little bit, I think, in the next piece. But as far as, so this can kind of be a little bit all over the map, right? So in the context of age leads, in the context of traffic that or leads that are aggregated from affiliates or come through affiliate channels and are aggregated, leads that come from thank you pages. We call them co-registration sometimes. And not that the terms are important, but those, again, those journeys of your customer will affect sort of the percentage of those that within a reasonable, amount of time you can turn into leads, or into revenue, into signed deals. I will tell you from like the most simplistic of lead generation, so the shortest path, the most ideal consumer experience, some of the KPIs that we look for. So this is stuff that you're doing with Google Ads, stuff that you're doing with SEO and content, maybe some email marketing. Generally, we're expecting anywhere from 3 to 5% of those to turn into closed deals from internet leads. Now, again, this is really broad. So sometimes that can be much better, but for kind of the average sort of semi-optimized sales process, you should be getting at least 3 to 5% of those turning into funded deals of some sort, or revenue. So that's pretty pretty good. And then again, every industry has a little bit of a different dynamic. The other thing that you should look for, because this accounts for the waste, and there will inevitably be waste, is looking for your what they call in kind of the business world, the CAC, right? The cost of acquisition. That also helps to account. So you usually want to know, like, what is the cost of acquisition, and that will account for the things that don't convert and make sure that those economics stay intact. So those are kind of the two numbers I look for, is like, what is the percentage of leads that convert into closed deals? And then ultimately, what is my total cost of acquisition, and making sure that that aligns with the economics of my business.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll end it with one more question here. So what's better, is buying leads or generating them for yourself?
It's great. Both. So generally it is a good idea, again, depending on budgets, size of organization, the number of people you're doing. Ideally there is some advantages to being able to do both. So when you buy leads, you can generally, again, put more of your dollars against actual leads and opportunities. But that comes with some downsides, right? The convertibility of that is probably a little bit lower. The transparency is a little bit lower. So ideally, I like to be able to do at least some of my own generation so that I can ask good questions, or I can understand what I'm getting in buying. So I can kind of scale with lead buying, and then I can do some of my own to give me some asset building to my company, right? I'm building to have lead generation capabilities inside of my organization is going to make that organization more valuable, right? It's less dependent on sort of the unknown of buying leads. So ideally you can do both. I think ultimately, growing an asset within your own organization and generating your own leads and having that capability, whether through an agency or your own in-house capabilities, is ultimately where you want to get to. Because of the how diverse the internet is, and just kind of like back to that exclusivity thing, because there are so many options. Rarely can an organization, even Rocket, buys leads, right? Because in any brand, you will probably not get to ultimately the scale that you need to, for what you'll have to invest by just generating your own leads. This is why, like when we talk about FCC and some of the things that are afoot, this is problematic, because the industries that we're talking about and we work in, we need lead generation companies, because we just cannot generate the volume underneath our own unique brand in an efficient enough way. But you should definitely know how to do that and have that capability. So it's kind of a both. All right. So last question, again, sort of to tease part two, and then we can, like I said, we can start talking about a little bit about what Kaleido, if you want to stay on later. So part two, we're going to talk about sales process. We're going to get super granular. We have kind of our own sort of, prism sales sequence that we've kind of branded. I'm going to tease this a little bit. The reason you want to be on part two is because we're going to get really granular, like this granular. We're going to talk about some sequences and some approaches that we've seen be effective, and how to design these. So again, you could copy this today and execute it. It doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily going to give you the best return, but this will give you some guidance, right? So I want to show you how to build these type of approaches. So again, you want to make sure you sign up for that second one, because we're gonna go deep, and hopefully provide you guys a lot of good information on how to convert whatever leads are coming into your CRO.